2019 will go down as an average Gus Malzahn season. 9 regular season wins and too many tough games on the schedule to make it special. The loss to Minnesota in the bowl game left a sting in the offseason, but the win over Alabama has the fan base optimistic for 2020, and you can see why. Bo Nix enters his sophomore year with a ton of great experience. He's expected to take the next step. Add in fellow sophomore DJ Williams at running back and star receiver Seth Williams. Auburn should be fine on offense. The defense might be the issue, with 6 players gone to the NFL, but Kevin Steele's squad had a lot of depth coming back. As always, the season will hinge on 3 games: LSU, Georgia, and Alabama. But take note, things are different this year. LSU and Georgia have basically flipped. Auburn wanted to get away from that Georgia-Alabama finish. Well, now it's LSU-Alabama back-to-back. The good news, though, is at least now they are split home and away. And for more on the Auburn Tigers, we bring in Jason Caldwell from 24/7 Sports for the Auburn Tigers. Jason, thanks very much for being with us here today.
Absolutely, no problem at all.
You know, to me, as somebody who covers Auburn casually, you are much more in depth with them than I am. I feel like this team could go every year, could win 7 games, or they could win 11 or 12 games. Do you feel that way about this team with Gus Malzahn?
Yeah, you look at it, especially in this league, because it's everything kind of depends on schedule, and you look at kind of when you're catching teams, how they kind of going through their season, all that. So it all depends on that. Especially you look this year's maybe more topsy turvy and unpredictable than any other because the lack of summer, the lack of spring football. You have some changes, in coaching staffs for teams, new quarterbacks. So it just kind of throws the entire league up for grabs. But I think you look at it and, I think you look, to me, it's like an 8 to 10 win kind of scenario that you see for Auburn right now going really those hinge games being, the Alabama game, LSU game, Georgia game, that kind of determine whether or not you're an 8-win team or whether or not you can push for a trip to Atlanta.
When you follow the team historically, what do you think it has been over the years when you say, well, they could win 10 games? What is it that you've seen that has prevented Auburn from going over the top? I know you mentioned Alabama and Georgia and LSU. What prevents them from being on equal footing with all 3 of those teams?
Yeah, I think to me it's probably just consistency, I think, is one of the issues there. And I think when you start talking about, having those games away from home this year, you go to Georgia, go to Alabama, it throws a big kink into things. So I think you're looking probably as much as anything, I think it's schedule. I mean, you look and when you have, LSU, Texas A&M, Georgia, Alabama, and you're going to have those 4 every year, and then, throw in whoever else from the East and, Ole Miss, Mississippi State capable, obviously, of it's just a difficult run to do it consistently year in year. That's why you have to be impressed by what we've seen in this league from, Alabama, LSU, Georgia. It's just a tough task to go through that year in and year out.
Yeah, and it was ironic that they wanted to avoid the Georgia-Alabama ending, and now they have LSU instead of Georgia. LSU just hitting their prime. We have no idea what it'll be like in 2020 and beyond for them, that's for sure, with Joe Burrow and everybody gone. On offense, let's start there. Bo Nix, it looks like comfortability is going to be the next step for him. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think you look and you saw that happening last year. In the last 6 games, he did not throw an interception. So 5 touchdowns, no interceptions in the last 6 games. That's 64% completion percentage. You saw them trusting more, doing more of those things. And I think you look at a guy that continues to mature, obviously a ton of experience, most of, high school level playing since he was in the 8th grade. He knows what it's all about. Now he's got SEC level experience. He played at Florida, he played at LSU. And so you've been in some hostile environments. And I think you look at that, coupled with Chad Morris coming in as the offensive coordinator and kind of tweaking the system, probably is a better fit for what Bo does. Then I think you look at a guy that should be ready to take a step forward.
Are you in the boat that says Malzahn's offense has to have a running quarterback, or do you believe that they can flourish with a guy who throws the ball a lot? Jarrett Stidham from 2017 comes to mind, maybe not so much 2018. Where do you see that fitting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is going to be Malzahn's offense per se. And I think Chad Marsh is going to have his tweaks and differences in his. And I think both can work with a guy who is a passing quarterback, but also athletic enough to make plays with his legs. I think that's what you have to have. You can't have a statue at quarterback. But you're right. You mentioned 2017. Until Kerryon Johnson got hurt, Auburn was playing as well as anybody in the country, and that was with a quarterback who wasn't a running quarterback. And so I think you can make it work, but you need, as much athleticism as you have, it obviously makes it better, I think, because then you give yourself – we saw Bo Nix last year. Give yourself the ability to make plays with your legs, and it can open up things.
Now, I look at the defense. They have been the heroes the last 2 years. You want to talk about an irony with how great the offense was supposed to be, and the defense just turned to be lights out. You look at it on the face, they lost all the talent to the NFL. Is that a concern, or is depth one of those things that this team that you shouldn't be concerned about?
I think there's depth, but obviously you lose a lot of experience when you start talking about Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, Nick Coe up front, and then 4 starters in the secondary. You lose a lot of guys that have played a lot of football. The good news is that they rotate, and that's what they do under Kevin Steele. They rotate. So you got some guys that have played, got some experience. You have all your linebackers back, which is really big when you start talking about kind of the heart and soul of the defense, having KJ Britt, Chandler Wooten, Zacoby McClain, Owen Popo. You got those 4 guys back to kind of be the heart and soul. But, yeah, you lose a ton, and it's obviously an issue, especially, up front is the biggest deal because you can find young guys to jump in there in the secondary, but when you start talking about the jumping in the wars of SEC football on the line of scrimmage, it takes some getting used to. And if you got guys that have been through that, then you have to lean on those guys like a Tyrone Truesdale in the middle and Big Cat Bryant outside. You got some of those guys, but you're going to have to depend on some new faces to step up.
Finally here, take the viewers through the schedule. I know Georgia and LSU have basically flip-flopped a little earlier for Georgia. Where do you see this team catching its footing and finding out where we find out where they stand? What games do you think?
Yeah, I think it kind of really depends on what this thing looks like. If you are playing non-conference games and you play
assuming they have a pretty normal schedule.
Correct. If you play North Carolina in week 2 in Atlanta, I think you'll have a pretty good idea then of what this team is all about because you look and you lose 4 secondary guys. You're going to face a team that's going to throw it all over the yard and really good passing team. That'll give them an idea of where they stand heading into, starting a SEC play there in a couple of weeks. So I think that's probably the first big hurdle. And then you mentioned that, the trip to Georgia in week 5 or so. Those 2 things kind of give you that litmus test early on. So I think North Carolina, Georgia. I think the good news for the schedule is even though you flip, the big deal is that you don't have back-to-back road games at the end. You have LSU at home. So even though you flip and it doesn't get any easier in terms of the teams, I think the balance of the schedule, having home and away at the end is something that should help out a little bit.
Yeah, and that was the thing everybody was clamoring for with Georgia and Alabama. Get one at home and one on the road, and they switched the team with LSU, but at least they got that one at home and one on the road. Jason Caldwell, 24/7 Sports, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.